Welcome back to the Budding Author Podcast with me, Simon Ward. Today we're talking editing. So editing is a big subject and we need some big special people on here. We've got Michelle and David from Darling Axe, and they are the people to talk to if you want to talk editing. So first question, we have got a quiz coming, by the way, my special Edit My Line quiz. We're going to have that. We're going to test them live. That's what you want to do. See how good they are. Are you up for the challenge for that?
Hope so.
Yeah, you go for
Getting
it
nervous.
So, David, biggest editing mistake that people make?
Well, I mean, we can talk about two different kind of streams of editing, developmental editing and line editing. But usually people come to us first for developmental editing. So in that case, we're not really making changes at the line level to grammar or flow or anything like that. We're looking at big picture issues. And that's what I prefer to do. I think Michelle prefers line editing. Yeah, so the biggest issue that we see, I think, at the developmental stage is the lack of a clear narrative goal. And or a lack of a strong internal conflict, which can both run a lot of interference in terms of what we refer to as emotional draw. So that quality of a narrative that keeps readers engaged, anticipatory, and turning pages. So the narrative goal being the kind of source, the initial kind of starting point of the story's engine that the protagonist is going to struggle and strive toward over the course of the story, giving readers something to cheer them on toward, generating all of that engagement and drive, and also a tremendous amount of characterization comes out of that. So we do see some narrative goals as well. Sometimes we see stories without a clear narrative goal at all. That's a little bit more rare. Usually the issue is that the narrative goal just isn't quite specific enough, or that it doesn't connect directly to the climax. So sometimes we see meandering storylines where the narrative goal shifts here and there and kind of gets resolved, and then a new goal forms, and that just doesn't kind of create the same through line of engagement.
Got you. As far as developmental editing is concerned, how often do you see plot lines not completed? So like there's a separate strain that isn't sort of tied off at the end of the story. Is that common?
Yes. I don't know if you want to take that, David, or you want me to. Yeah, I mean, I think we see a lot of lack of follow through is really what it is that you get stories that sort of get started and meander off and there's not the follow through that we're looking for, which is really basically a lack of causality as well, where parts of stories get started and then you're looking for the logical next consequence, sort of the other shoe to fall, and it just doesn't. And so you end up with a story at the end where your reader is asking questions, but probably not the right questions, because they're sort of thinking, what happened to that person? They just kind of disappeared. So yeah, that does happen. Yeah,
I think with it, not every character in the story is going to have a very clear sort of arc, as it were. But I mean, people that you're going into detail on, from my point of view, if I've got a character that's going to be key to the story, I'll give them a wider description and they will hold with the story. People that are sort of not so connected to the story, I'll just give a more shallow description to. But it's making sure that you're following those through and you don't sort of lose characters on the way. The thriller writers, of course, have got a good way of dealing with that, and you just kill people off if they. So here's a question. Here's a question for you. This is about one of my books, actually. It's a sci-fi thriller, or psychological thriller, rather. And I introduce a character, a very lovable character, who dies very quickly in the story, and one of my beta readers said, like, it's sort of like she appeared and then she died straight away. Is that I did that for shock, for the shock element? It was like you just think you're getting sort of into a comfortable position, and then slap, it's all gone again. Is that typical for that kind of writing, or do you think I'm out on my own with that one?
Well, one of my books has that almost exact same scenario, actually. The main character's mother is introduced, and I think she dies at the end of the first chapter or the end of the second chapter. It's a story about, the end of World War II, so these things happened. But I think, I mean, look at George R.R. Martin, right? He kills his main characters left and right. You have no control over what's going to happen. I mean, I think that
Game of Thrones hatchet line. Yeah,
exactly. But I think one of the values perhaps in doing that is that your reader is then on very uncertain ground, because they don't know what could happen. If this person can die, that means anybody can die, Yeah. So I think you introduce that.
And I think, are you guys one for David? The plotting or pantsing? What do you think?
I was actually thinking it would be really cool to do a study of like a big survey to collect a bunch of data of traditionally published writers and how many of them pants versus plot. I've definitely anecdotally talked to many published successful authors who started out pantsing and switched to plotting, but then there are some famous authors who still pants. Like I think Stephen King pantses still.
Yeah, he does.
But the issue with pantsing is you have to be willing to burn your first draft and start over. Like you have to be willing to do that, like absolutely foundational rewrite. And I think that that's where a lot of people get stuck with pantsing, is they think that pantsing is just as good as plotting or as outlining, and they get to the end of the first draft and they think they're almost there. Whereas the plotter is going to do a tremendous amount of work beforehand, the pantser has to do that work after the first draft. So I think that they're both totally reasonable paths, but you need to kind of keep that amount of work in mind. Like it's not easy to make, to turn a first draft into a finished product. Everybody kind of has to work at it and keep coming back to it. Personally, one thing that I like to do is, and I started doing this a few years ago, is I pants at the outlining stage. So rather than sitting down and like trying to come up with plot points, I start by writing kind of like a pantsed synopsis. Like I have a basic story in my head, and I sit down and I just pour it out like free writing style, 1,000 words, and then I set that aside. I don't look at it. I do the same thing again the next day, 1,000 words, and I just keep doing that over a series of days. And then I will go back and I will read them all, see kind of what ideas kind of came to me and that I then forgot about, and then I try to start to take all of that and judge, okay, what's really coming together here? What do I like the most, and start to turn that into a more structured outline.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I started off sort of on the pantsing, and then I started to plot more. But of course, and I think you'll probably laugh at this, you plotted out your story, and then when you start writing it, the characters decide that it's going in a different direction. So it changes. It changes. That's
that's a really important point. That's something that Michelle and I have talked about quite a lot, and it's actually some advice I was just giving to a client, because what happens is if you don't allow for that, you end up with characters that do absurd things that don't make any sense logically to who they are as a character, because it's like the author has this preconceived idea of what the plot's going to be, and they just force the characters to do the things that they've preordained, even though it doesn't actually hold true to as the reader has come to understand who that character is.
A bit of a curveball question now. Something we talked about just before we went live. What should success look like for the majority of authors?
Oh boy. I mean, I think that's a very personal question. It kind of depends on what you want out of writing. I think that one of the important things, though, with the whole writing process is that, I know there are a lot of writers who want to be published, want to have written, rather than enjoying the process of actually sitting down and writing. And I feel like if that's not part of of what success looks like for you. Like if you don't actually like the daily process of sitting down and creating characters and putting all of this stuff together, then regardless of how successful you are and how many books you get published, you're not going to really love your life because you don't like the daily grind. I mean, if it is a grind, then you know, yeah. So I feel like that is it's a really important question to ask yourself as a writer. You know, like, do you actually like the process of what you're doing? Because that, like, to me, you know, I mean, obviously we all want to be published, but you know, if we're not enjoying what we're doing, then why are we doing it?
Yeah, I think for me, it's if somebody goes into it thinking they're going to make a lot of money doing it, I think they're entering into the wrong realm, really. People do make money with books, but as we talked about with David briefly, we can spend a lot of money on advertising and not particularly make the money back from that. So I think, as David was saying, the example you gave me, the guy that had spent a lot of money on advertising, but he had sold a lot of books. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, about the Viking author I was telling you about?
Yeah, Viking. Yeah, that was the one. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one client I've worked with a number of times, CJ Adrian. Yeah, so he's a Viking historian, and he's done really well for himself. And he spends a lot of money on advertising, but he has the sales to back it up. And so I think that that's a good example of advertising doing what it's meant to do, but there's different ways to approach advertising, and so initially, like, you approach advertising as a test to see how your book is going to be received by a certain market, to test keywords, to test all of these different things. So you don't go into it expecting a return right away. It is an investment. And the other thing about advertising is you don't always know how effective it was. You spend that money, people see your book, they might write a note on a piece of paper and then go back on a different computer. Maybe they've switched to their laptop to buy it, and that doesn't get tracked. And so you can't always see the immediate and long-term returns on advertising, but mostly, you know, that's the first approach is a test. But eventually, advertising ideally should have a return on investment. And so a lot of that can come down to having a pipeline, which we talked about earlier. And so, like, ideally, you want to be coming out with the book fairly regularly. They say at least one per year. That's the advice that Chuck Palahniuk gives in his book Consider This, which he was given by a publisher. Come out with at least one book per year, or you'll become irrelevant. So the more books you have, the more chain sales you can have. So and also another thing is in the way that these advertising management systems work, you can create multiple ads for multiple books, and then the ad bots will choose based on the audience, based on the keywords, which ad they're going to show, and they will kind of min-max to make sure that your ads are reaching the most people for the most sales, because, you know, that's to the benefit of the advertiser as well as you. So it's kind of a piece of the puzzle that you have to learn and develop. It's not like an instant, oh, you put money in, you get money out scenario.
Yeah, I think it can be. I did a non-fiction piece about gambling, the sort of learning about gambling effectively. And so I think as far as advertising, I think you need to set yourself a budget of what you're willing to spend to find out what's going on. And you can't sort of say, okay, I'm going to spend $500 on this, and then if you're $300 in with no sales, I think sort of sense checking, you should be stepping in and going, hang on, this isn't working. And that's why I think I did a show with Jen McLeod, and we talked about sort of sampling it and just tasting it with very low levels of budget to sort of see what kind of response you're getting. Like, from my point of view, like for an Amazon ad, for example, if there's an ebook that I might make £2 on, for example, I don't want to be paying sort of 80 pence a click for that, because that's just never going to be making a profit on that. So that's where it's difficult. Coming to Michelle, Line editing. What's the biggest thing you come across in line editing that you have to correct?
Well, I mean, a lot of things. The thing that I tend to focus on seems very small, actually, but I feel like it has big repercussions, which is the use of generic gestures. I find that people tend to throw in characters smiling and nodding, and their palms are sweating, and they're always looking at things. Which is something that we generally, if you're in a deep point of view, you don't need to tell the reader that the character is looking at something, because if they're describing it, we take it for granted that they can see it. So I feel like these generic gestures, they tend to get thrown in, as beats, and it's such a squandered opportunity, because this could be a moment where we could get the setting reinforced, we could have a better indication of character, that we could be doing a lot of things other than smiling and nodding, which really does nothing to bring that character to life. So they're very small moments, but I feel like that they accrue, and if they're used effectively, they can make a huge difference.
I've got a sheet, and it's about like 10 different ways to smile and that sort of thing. I must admit, yes. I do use half smile. I use half smile probably too much probably.
I think we all do, and I mean, I know for myself, I have to go through afterwards and weed them out and think, oh, here, now they're smirking, now they're grinning. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways, right? And because it's an easy spot to just sort of throw in like a placeholder, and then if you're aware of it, and you can go back and correct them, and find more effective ways of bringing the character to life, then you can save those moments.
Yeah, with tags, I think the said is dead is incorrect. I think I'll probably use said more often than not, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. Said is essentially invisible. Although there's that one, I can't remember which book it is, by Kurt Vonnegut, where he adds he said, like after every single line in this one scene, and it's really funny. Said is invisible, and when you start saying like he guffawed or he quipped, or whatever, it gets a bit ridiculous, and then readers start to notice it, and when we notice it, it's pulling us out of the story. Mm-hmm. But like Michelle's saying, beats could be an action, it could be like a gesture, it could be a bit of description, it could be a bit of even introspection. Beats are a great substitute for tags. So if you wanted to get rid of said, rather than replace it with a goofy tag, replace it with a beat instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sort of he tipped his hat sort of thing, as he
said.
Yeah, got you. Okay. One sort of, when I'm critiquing work, dialogue always jumps out at me. Unnatural dialogue, where sort of putting somebody's name at the start of the conversation when they're standing in front of you, it's like, yeah, Jake, yeah, and all this, and so that's it. So often when I'm sort of critiquing work, it's sort of I just jump at the dialogue, and it's like you can take out sort of half of that really and get more natural conversation going. Mm-hmm. I think we're at the point where we need to give you a challenge.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a challenge, and then my challenge is going to be to read live on air, which I'm not particularly great at. I'm not very good at scripted stuff. I'm going to read a little, while you're doing your challenge, I'm going to read a little bit of Time to Click, and you can tell me which page you want me to read. So give me a page number.
49.
49. I'm glad you've gone early. When I did this before, they picked like 230. It's like, hang on, that's getting right there. 49. This is a psychological thriller. Let's have a look. I'll get that a little bit. Right then, for you guys, I'm going to give you a line, and I'd like you to complete the line. Complete the line to a certain genre. So do you both want to work on the same genre, or should we just make it random?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think we do that.
Random, okay.
I'll roll the dice first for David.
Okay.
So you'll be on thriller.
Okay.
And for Michelle, 5. You're on mystery.
Okay.
Okay. His eyes locked onto her as soon as he entered the bar. In fact, no, forget that. Let me start again.
Okay.
I've got a shorter version of that. She didn't notice him enter the bar, but when she spotted him, and then you finish the line. She didn't notice him enter the bar, but when she spotted him, and then you carry on and finish that. So I'll give you a couple of minutes for that one. I want to read a little bit of this. Where are we on this? Page 49. I'm just being careful. I'm not going to give away too much on this. Right then. He threw his phone onto the sofa. James told Ethan to move on from Rachel, but he didn't want to. Ethan wanted to wait until she was ready, but he couldn't disagree with James. She had messed with his emotions, but he still preferred her company to James's. She was a better option than being thrust into James's seeded conveyor belt of easy and gullible women. Let's try to get this moving, Ethan announced as he grabbed his mobile to message Rachel. As he began the message, his phone rang. Hiya, sorry about last night, had too much to drink, Rachel said. When did you leave? Ethan asked. I woke up at 5, didn't want to wake you. I needed a shower. Another house at 11 and needed to get home and shower. That's just a little snippet. How are we doing? Do you need more time?
I'm good.
I'm not sure how much you want us to write, so I didn't write very much.
So it's worth noting that, you know, good writing is rewriting. So, you know,
yes. Thank you for making that point.
There's no criticism here. We're not expecting expert stuff, but it's just a little bit of fun, that's all. Okay then, David, I think you had Thriller, didn't you?
I did. Okay. So, and I'm, you know, just trying to channel the thriller here. So she didn't notice him enter the bar, but when she spotted him, she slid her backpack off her shoulder and grasped the cold steel of a pistol tucked in the side pocket.
Ooh.
That's very good. People watching this, by the way, we can put in the comments what we think and who we think is best. Go on, Michelle.
Okay.
There's no competition, of course. Okay, Michelle, going to you. Mystery.
She didn't notice him enter the bar, but when she spotted him, she downed her drink and slipped out the back door. He's here, she texted quickly.
Oh, very good. You guys know your stuff. I'm liking that. We've not primed them, you know. This is just straight into the action. We haven't sort of given them a week to work on it. Right then. Final thing to discuss before we wrap up. Twitter. People have moved out to Blue Sky. What do you guys know about that, and what you got to say about it?
Well, I mean, most of the writers that we know seem to have migrated off of X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, to Blue Sky. It seems to be a more welcoming community on Blue Sky, I guess I'd say. We have to be careful, I suppose, what we say about all of this. But the writing community seems to have migrated to Blue Sky.
Yeah. I think it's difficult, David, if you've got sort of, I haven't, but if you've got like 30,000 followers on Twitter and you're having to start again. So what do you think people should do in that respect?
I think that's not a concern. I have over 80,000 followers on my Twitter account. I have, I don't know, maybe 10,000 followers now on my Blue Sky account. My Blue Sky account has far, far better engagement. I actually went through and did a quick little kind of just not like a, you know, it's not science, but I did a quick comparison to look at some of the data that I was getting on like my last 10 most recent posts. And I think that my engagement on Blue Sky at that time was something like 500% better. And then if you accounted for the difference in followers, it was like 7,000% better. So one thing that's happened, like I really was able to build Darling Axe into the company it is now because of Twitter of old, before Elon Musk bought it. And there was at one time that I was getting 700,000 impressions per month, which means 700,000 screens that one of my tweets was showing up on. Whether or not people took notice of it or liked it or anything, just that kind of like raw picture of how the extent of that reach. After Elon Musk took over and changed the algorithm and introduced, pay to play, that quickly dropped to 200,000, and it continued to drop. And then he put the analytics behind the paywall, so I don't even know anymore. But it's pretty abysmal. Every once in a while, I'll have a post do really well on X, but I don't spend much time there anymore. I do still cross post because there is still a lot of the writing community for the reason that you gave. They've got a following there. They're worried. They don't want to walk away from their community. Maybe they created a profile on Blue Sky and put in a little bit of effort and didn't see anything come of it, and so just kept with X or Twitter. But the more common story is that people are loving Blue Sky. It's a really interesting platform. It's run by a small team. I think they only have 20 employees, and it's built with a decentralized structure to make it what they call billionaire proof, so that somebody can't come along and just buy it. It's open source, and somebody else could just start a new instance of it in a similar, not quite exactly the same, but in a similar way to Mastodon. And so for all of those reasons, it's pretty cool. And there's no ads at all on Blue Sky. So that's another good reason to be over there. So yeah, overall, I think Blue Sky is the place to be for the writing community right now.
Okay, I'm on Blue Sky. I need to do a little bit more. I think it's difficult. Obviously, as a self-published author, there's a lot of plates to spin. And particularly for me, because I have another show as well to do with the football team I follow, Walsall in England, and that takes a lot of my time. So I'm looking at YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok for both writing and for the football stuff. So it's one of those. It's like, how many more platforms can I run at the same time? I'm on Threads, but I don't really do much with that, to be honest. I think
I'm also on Threads, and it's I don't get it. I don't understand how engagement works there. It's just like sending messages into an abyss or a void. Some people have success there. I think the thing with Threads is you have to be, it's for chatting. It's for really just person-to-person engagement. It's not a place where you go and share good content and people follow you because they like your content. It's much about the communication level. But a question for you, Simon: Are you tweeting out and posting all of these podcasts of the two different topics all on the same account, or do you have different accounts for that?
No, I have two different accounts, which does make things very challenging for me. On Twitter, I've got one browser that I use for my author stuff, and another browser I use for my Walsall Fan TV stuff. And then I do occasionally slip up and post it to the wrong one, but I've sort of got my routine sort of set. But it is complex doing that. I could do with knocking some on the head, really, but as a relatively new author, I'm still sort of building up following and that sort of thing. So you don't like to count anything out, but in the same way, you sort of spread yourself too thin if you're not careful. TikTok, do you do TikTok?
TikTok is we don't, but TikTok is sort of in the danger zone right now. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to be using it for much longer. It's going to be banned in the United States, possibly. So it's hard to say where people are migrating from that.
In the UK, there's no ban or anything in the UK at the minute, I don't think. But you think it could close down quite a lot, you're saying, in the US?
It might. I mean, Trump started the ban, and then he came as a savior and as acting like he's this wonderful person for having saved TikTok. So it's a bit confusing,
Yes.
that messaging around that, whether he intends to continue to be the savior of TikTok or if he's going to flip-flop back and ban it again. Who knows? But no, I think a lot of people, there's like what they call book talk. A lot of people do have
description to get in touch with Michelle and David. Also, I'll be linking my description for a turmeric company. It's a health product for people want to look after themselves and repair themselves quickly. So that's going to be in there as well. But I think we are out of time. So thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Michelle, David, that's been first class. Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.